In one hand, I have the Panasonic WXF1 camcorder, and in the other, the Sony AX53. They are going to go head to head in this video. It's an ever-shrinking world of consumer 4K camcorders, so we're going to see which one is better. So I just want to clarify what camcorders we are comparing, because there's a few overlapping models. The Sony AX53, I did a full review of this one, but there's also an AX43, which is just like this, except it's a little cheaper because it drops the electronic viewfinder. Otherwise, same camera.
Now both the 43 and 53 have been discontinued, but on the secondhand marketplace you can get the 53 between $700 and $800. The three Panasonic camcorders, the XF1, VX1, and now the new VX3, all have the same sensor, so the image quality is going to be the same on all of them. I have the XF1 in this video, which I'm reviewing. That one has a secondary small sub camera and an electronic viewfinder, and the AX53 has an electronic viewfinder as well. That little second camera and the viewfinder makes it a little more expensive, around $1,000 or $900 on sale than the other models. The VX3 is basically a VX1, which doesn't have the viewfinder, but the picture quality is the same. They made a few minor improvements, such as adding a USB-C port, because that's a new standard. They added a line input and timestamping. These are not a big deal. The lens is the same aperture, sensor, so again, you're going to get the same image quality out of all three camcorders. So regardless of which one of those three you have, this video is applicable. Now between the Panasonic and Sony, both are around the same weight, very marginal difference, and they both feel really light in the hands. The Sony's wide angle is around 27 millimeters versus a slightly wider 25 millimeters on the Panasonic, and let's take a look at that difference. Here is the Panasonic, and we're going to switch to the Sony. It's a little tighter, but if you look closely at the sharpness difference, I think you may see something, and this is a clue of things to come. Panasonic may not be quite as sharp in 4K. We're going to check that out soon. Both cameras have similar 1/2.5 inch CMOS sensors, and both apertures are around the same.
And I'll be showing you some in-depth low-light comparisons a little bit later in this video.
Now, as far as the zoom goes, the Sony claims a 30 times zoom, but that's a little cheating because part of that zoom range is clear image zoom, not a true optical zoom. The true optical zoom is 20 times in the Sony compared to a true optical of 24 times in the Panasonic. And the thing with the Sony is you can't turn off that clear image zoom. So with the Panasonic, they have something called an intelligent zoom, which gets you to 32 times, which you can turn on and off. So what's the zoom difference look like? Well, here we're looking in 4K 30 on the Sony. Pay attention to the lettering on that sign and how close you get. This is with some clear image zoom assistance compared to the true 24 times optical zoom. You see, you don't get in quite as tight with the Panasonic. Now I'm also hand-holding both cameras so you can see the stabilization effectiveness with both. Not rock steady, but considering the zoom range, it's not bad. Sadly, both cameras are limited to a maximum 4K 30, but they both can do 1080p 60. Both cameras have mic and headphone ports. Both cameras have single SD card slots, and both cameras can output a clean HDMI signal. They both have night vision. Now, neither camera has the most modern autofocus system. They are going to get confused and hunt like in this scene here. For the most part, though, I found that it works fairly well in good lighting conditions. But since it is a slightly slower than modern autofocus systems for fast action and sports, it may disappoint you a little bit. A nice and rather unique feature you don't find anymore is the pull-out and tiltable viewfinders, which help for creative angles, but there is a difference in viewfinders. After shooting with both cameras for a while, I just felt that the Panasonic's viewfinder was a little bigger, maybe just a little clearer and sharper, and just more pleasurable to use. Now, both cameras have pull-out 3-inch fully articulating screens, which turn the cameras on and off when you pull them out, which is nice. But outdoors, you can see the Panasonic on the right is brighter. There just seems to be less glare on the Panasonic, which makes it easier and more pleasurable to use outside. The XF1, which I'm reviewing, has that little second camera attached to the screen. I'm not going to get into the details of that here. I do have another video on that. Both have nearly identical zoom rocker switches on the top. The Sony with its Zeiss lens and programmable front lens ring. So does the Panasonic with its Leica brand. Both have a few programmable buttons and a dedicated photo button. And if you want to attach accessories like a light or a mic, both cameras have kind of flimsy plastic doors, underneath of which are cold shoes.
So from a physical point of view, these cameras are very similar, but where the rubber really meets the road is image quality, and that's the part of the video we're going to get into right now. But before we do that, if you can just take a quick second, do hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help this growing channel to produce more videos about camcorders, vintage gear, and new gear as well.
So there's a lot of detail in this city skyline. Let's take a look at the Panasonic. It looks good, but the Sony, I think, looks even better. I just think it exposes better. You see more of the sky here. Now let's compare the two in 1080p. Here's the Sony AX53, and when we switch to the Panasonic, kind of see more artifacts here. And when you crop in, you can take a look and see the Panasonic looks like it's scaling. It doesn't look right. Something looks wrong, noisy, artifacty, whereas the Sony looks a lot cleaner. So beware of this if you shoot in 1080p. In 4K, I think they're closer, but I kind of like how the Sony exposes better in this particular scene. And no internal picture adjustments were made in these cameras. So I brought both cameras to the park on a beautiful fall day, and we had our beautiful model April here to demonstrate the picture quality of both cameras. Here we have the Panasonic, and switching to the Sony, scene rendition looks very, very similar. Pay attention to the colors, to the sharpness, how it handles light and dark, kind of harsh sunlight here with some shadows. Here the Panasonic, I think, is doing a pretty good job. Now the leaf here can interfere with focus for sure. The AX53 is finding her face and staying focused on her face despite that leaf sort of blocking the frame. However, when we pull back, it focuses on the leaf, so it understands that that is the subject. The Panasonic, let's see how well it does. When we zoom in to her face, it's taking a little longer to focus. However, it is refocusing on the leaf as we pull back. Again, these cameras do not use the most modern autofocus systems, so they may take a little longer, like in this case, to find focus, but for the most part, I found that they work fairly well. This is at full zoom on these geese, hand holding, and both look very similar. I think these are good images, not overexposed, exposed properly. Now, as we continue the test, we'll find that these geese are coming in for a landing. Both of these cameras produce nice images outdoors, great for travel. That wide angle and zoom and the power zoom really make it a great travel, all-purpose for your kids' sports, even for semi-professional use too, because of the mic and headphone jack. You can see here it's producing some very nice 4K images. If you're into aviation photography, again, it takes a few seconds, even with the Sony, to focus in, but you can clearly read the airline and you can get in nice and tight on this plane. The zooms are very powerful on these small cameras.
Here's another plane with the AX53. And we got a JetBlue.
Now let's try to get a plane shot with the WXF1. Hey, your lens cap is closed, moron.
Well, you're a moron, which stands for moron, moron.
Here we got another aviation shot with the penny. Plane's flying nice and low here. This is 4K. That's a nice shot right there.
Let's just take a look here at this squirrel at full zoom hand holding. Take a look at the color of the leaves on the ground, the hues, the red, the oranges. This is with the Panasonic XF1 as we switch to the Sony. Kind of similar color rendition, both cameras very pleasing. What about for vlogging?
We're vlogging here with the AX53. Vlogging with the AX53 and walking with the AX53 in 4K. I do see a box around my face, so it does appear to be recognizing it. and we are vlogging. Vlogging? It used to be called blogging. We are going to vlog here, camera at arm's length with the XV1, 25mm wide angle equivalent. So you can see if this is something that you may want to vlog with, going in and out of sun, so you can see how it handles the dynamic. Ooh, that sun is really in my eye, so you can see how it handles the dynamic range.
So let's see how these cameras do in low light. And this New York City skyline here is the AX53, a nice image. In addition to the Sony looking a little crisper, I think it's also a little less noisy. I see some more noise in the upper left than I do in the Sony. Just generally just a little bit of a cleaner image here with the Sony. Now, during Halloween, this building had a very cool Halloween type light setup where it made it look like it was a pumpkin face. Zooming in here, it was a bright orange. So I wanted to see how both cameras compared with the bright orange. The Sony got it a little brighter and a little more accurate, but again, both cameras I think did well here in this Halloween lighting scene. Both cameras have small sensors, so it's tough. Here is a nice sunset scene, and the Sony captured the nice fire in the sky effect, whereas the Panasonic was a little more muted. At times, I think the Sony's colors are a little more vibrant. Wide angle in a low light room. Here's the Sony. The Panasonic seems a little more smeary than the Sony, which looks a little cleaner. When you zoom in, both cameras are very dark. The aperture's closed down. Neither look great. And the differences we see in video translate to the difference we see in the photos. Here's the photo quality. Again, a little more contrast with the Sony. But in the Panasonic, you can adjust your picture parameters like sharpness, exposure. So if you want to tweak it to get it closer to what the AX53 is, you can. The Sony doesn't have those controls, but there is a cinematone profile if you're into color grading. So the Sony does have that and the Panasonic doesn't. Comparing slow motion with both cameras, the Panasonic is more versatile. You've got a slow and fast motion. You pressing a button goes from one to the other. With the Panasonic, you can start shooting regular motion, and then with a button press, you go into slow motion. So you can decide on the fly if you want slow motion. With the Sony, you have to go into a special mode called Smooth Slow Record, and the quality is just terrible. Both cameras, it's 1080p resolution, but the Sony looks really low grade. If you want slow motion with the Sony, you're better off going into high-speed record, which shoots at 120 frames per second with sound, and you can slow it down in your editing program. Now, the XF1 has the small secondary sub-camera. You can even attach more than one camera. And the Panasonic camcorders have some other 4K bells and whistles, like what you can do after you shoot your video, like stabilize the video more. You could track certain things in the video. It's a little limited. You need to have a lot of contrast between the subject and the background. But if you like certain bells and whistles and extra features, then the Panasonic has these 4K effects, post-panning, where you could pan across your image even if you didn't shoot it that way, and this dolly zoom feature, which is like a Hollywood type of effect. I don't know if most people are going to use it, but the Sony doesn't offer those. Both, though, do have a Wi-Fi app. But we still have the burning question.
Which camera should you get? Well, it sort of depends on what you want. If you want more of those bells and whistles, if that appeals to you, like those 4K cropping and zooming and panning effects, which I just showed you, most people are not going to really use those. But slow motion, maybe they would. I think the Panasonic is better in that department. The Panasonic cameras also have that slightly wider angle and really a better, longer zoom optically than the Sony. Both cameras have digital zooms that go to crazy focal lengths. I really don't recommend using that. It really degrades the image too much. Stabilization is about a draw on both. Size and weight, about a draw. Price, about a draw. The Panasonic has a little better viewfinder and less glary view screen in my opinion. But for raw image quality, I think I give the edge to the Sony. I think it's just a bit sharper. I think it exposes better, a little better colors and more contrast. Of course, you can adjust your picture parameters with the Panasonic, so if you wanted to tweak it closer to the Sony, you could do that. And it's a shame the new model, the VX3, isn't really going to improve on any of the picture quality parameters because it's the same internals, the same sensor, the same guts. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate your support, and we'll see you in the next video.